Hello, and welcome to Imagine Europe, a new podcast by the Department of European Studies.
And we are live from San Diego.
That we are. Welcome, Professor Benko. Welcome, Edie, of course. My name is Clarissa Clough. I am the chair of the Department of European Studies. We are experimenting with the new technology, which is not new at all for a lot of other people, but it is for us. Our new podcast, department podcast entitled Imagine Europe, which is also the name of our speaker series. We want to use this as a venue to showcase our fabulous faculty, students, and staff, and hear their stories, what they're up to, what they were up to, what they will be up to. We also think that this is a vehicle for stories about ourselves in the past that may be of interest to people in the future. So we're kind of also recording for posterity here. Or as someone else said, we are recording for our obsolescence. Edie, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing good. I love this year. It's been so great. So many wonderful things have happened. I'm not sure what they are, but they must have happened somewhere. It's a good year as soon as it's over.
Yes, we should also probably disclose the fact that today is November 6, 2020. So, for those of you who are living in the moment and in the present, are following the news, you may just be on edge like everybody else. So, Edie, we just really, you are well known on campus, and this, of course, is also
infamous, maybe.
Oh, come on! This is, of course, also a podcast that we would like our colleagues in other departments to listen to. But perhaps people in the community may not know you, enough. Let's put it this way. So, do you want to say a few things about yourself? You, of course, maybe I should say you just retired, sadly, from our department after X decades of service. You have been you are a scholar of early modern French and Italian. You are also you were foundational in so many initiatives on campus. So, just how would you introduce yourself to the world?
Oh gosh, the world. That makes it much more difficult. I still am at SDSU. I mean, even though I have the title of being a retired professor, professor emerita, I still am running, co-directing a research consortium on campus. So I'm not quite totally gone, and I'm still on a number of MA committees. So the notion of I think retirement when you're talking about people who've been in the university is not meaning that you're going to now get on you wouldn't get on a cruise ship these days. But in the past, people think of getting on cruise ships, traveling, reading books all the time. And I do a lot of that. I did more in the past, actually, than now. But I think we don't really ever retire because what we did was not simply a job. It was an intellectual pursuit, and it's something that's extremely important. And so I say I'm a professor emerita, and I'm still working with students on campus. I'm still involved in certain initiatives in my department and other departments. And I love to travel. I have a gorgeous dog, and I also have a house in France. So, it's not too bad of a life.
No, not too bad at all. I'd like to visit that house in France. So
I would too these days.
How about for inviting oneself? Well, I actually should also say that this podcast is also the occasion for it is the celebration of the 20th anniversary of our department, the Department of European Studies. So, since you are such an institution at San Diego State and certainly were present and involved in the foundation of the department, would you like to tell us a little bit about what went down?
Okay, the history of our department is a very strange one. In many ways, it started in 1991, 1992, when there was a major budget crisis in the CSU, and we're used to budget crises, but it was one in which a lot of departments were scheduled for elimination, unimportant things like anthropology, chemistry, and also things like French, Italian, German, and Russian. So at that point, things got better, but we were left with the most of the professors in German and Russian had retired, and I at that point was chair of French and Italian, and I became acting chair of German and Russian. So we had this de facto relationship that German and Russian and French and Italian had the same department chair.
What year was that? Can you
I 92, 93. I mean, it went on for a long time.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah,
you were chair of these two departments simultaneously. Wow,
yeah.
a long time. Okay.
Yeah, and so, but there was this feeling that we didn't want to just push the two departments together and have the four languages, because the only acronyms we could come up with were FRIG, and that didn't sound very good, or grief. So
That's even worse.
yeah, GRIF, we pronounced it, in French, grief. It just didn't seem right. So I and a number of other people in the department at that time tried to think of, was there a positive way to put things together, and this took years and years. But we eventually realized if we put the four language culture programs together and tried to have something that united them, it would make sense. Another department had a major called European Studies, and so we politely stole that major from the other department. I'll leave them unnamed for the moment. And that way, we would actually have a department that had a certain coherence. There would be elements in the major. And so, from that early 90s beginning of thinking how to organize things, we wound up in 2000 with the new Department of European Studies.
Sounds like a story that is both satisfying and needs more exploration. So that's definitely interesting to hear. I mean, origin stories are always, somehow flawed, but also important as well. What do you think are the achievements that the department has was able to accomplish in these 20 years?
Well, I think there are a number of things. One of the most important, especially at this time that we're living in, is we wanted to focus on contemporary Europe. All of the other programs have a wide range, but our European program, well, relatively wide range, but our European program is one that really focuses on Europe today, gives you a background of how Europe got to be that way, but it was to bring an element of important multinational, multicultural perspectives on Europe. And in doing that, one of the things that we did was to, I think, change, and I hope this is true. This is at least what I think, that we've changed the perspective of European studies does not mean studying a lot of dead white men. We look at other areas. We look at post-colonial era. We look at how the diaspora have functioned. So we're not just sitting staring at the Eiffel Tower. We're staring at many things in places where Europe has been a major influence, but also rethinking what Europe is and what Europe means in the 21st century. So I think that, I mean, in a sense, for me, that's the major accomplishment of allowing us to function in a way that was not being done before on campus.
Wow, you make me feel so proud to actually be part of European studies. But of course, this is the interest in contemporary Europe in a multicultural anti-racist, anti-fascist community, or range of communities is certainly shared among several of the colleagues in the department. I remember, actually, I was as I was thinking about the podcast, I remembered when we first met, which happened to be at the MLA in Philadelphia back in 2005.
Oh, right.
Like a part of what attracted me to the department, obviously the fact that there was an Italian position available, but also that it was in San Diego and that it had this cutting edge description about the contemporary moment, which I think we have probably built upon as well. Do you like you've touched upon the fact that like we don't want to talk about old and certainly dead white men.
We do still talk about some of them. They're not all bad. I mean, they have a place in the world.
Absolutely, we do want and need some of them as well. I do want to ask you though, the shift that you've seen between the departments of French and Italian and German and Russian and European studies. I mean, I think it's also been a larger shift in our disciplines in the university. Obviously, we're talking about San Diego State, but we can be talking about other larger trends in our profession. Our disciplines have gone through a lot of shifts, and the faces of those who are present are different too. I mean, I wonder whether you may want to comment on when you started at San Diego State.
We'll leave out some of those things from the past. They're better not remembered. But I think, in a sense, one of the things you're talking about is that how the disciplines have evolved, and people always thought of us as first, language. So all we were doing was teaching language, and we were sort of a utilitarian. We were a tool. We weren't a discipline. But literature was okay, so it was language and literature, which brought us back to all those dead white men. And that would be something, because I was thinking about when I first got here, I don't think there was a single woman on the MA reading list for French. There might have been one or two women authors, but I mean, that was it. So, as things developed, literature went beyond literature. We included cinema classes. Our department actually has more cinema classes than any department except the department of film. So we included things that weren't in the traditional curriculum, and we didn't just study literature for the beauty of it, though I still think that is a valuable study. We looked at it in historical context. We looked at the effects it could have outside of its own realm. What happens when a book gets translated? How does it function in another country? And so all of our disciplines slowly expanded, and many of our faculty are very, very interdisciplinary. I have a second specialty is in LGBTQ plus studies. So that was something I wasn't doing when I came to SDSU, but as things became more flexible and interdisciplinarity was supported, then I was able to do that. Many people think I'm a historian. They have no idea that I'm in a literature department, and what was used to be thought of as a literature department. But I also was able to do the work in history that I liked to do. And so I think that's what we have. We have this freedom to explore different areas, whether it be digital humanities, whether it be anti-racist studies. And we can do that and not say we have to be, penned into this little box.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Are there any cultural events, anything that the department or the French program has organized over the years that you feel particularly proud of?
On the French side, because I always kind of know that one best, on the French side, we've actually had a French theater, the only French language theater in San Diego, for about, I want to say, 35 years now. And with the exception of 1 year, there's always been a production. So it's been a long running enterprise, and it's one that students love. I mean, it brings groups of students together, they make friends, and I can see when I'm on Facebook, if I look at the friend circles of different students, they're all friends with the people they were in the plays with. So it creates a major community. The other thing that French did, we've had a French film festival since the early 2000s. And one of the things we tried to do in the French and Francophone Film Festival is to bring films that were not simply sort of typical French films, but also look at documentaries, look at Franco-African films, Belgian films, films made by French directors, but could be in another language. So again, it's something that's really marked what you can do if you have this freedom of the department. I know we have our Imagine Europe series, so we've been bringing a lot of interesting and well-known lectures together to the university. So I mean, I think the department has done a lot. Clarissa, you have brought so many people, I can't even begin to count them. You do so much for Italian and for European studies. So it also helps. You do. So I mean, it's kind of an exciting place to be around when we could actually be there.
Absolutely, right. I think we're all missing that, which is maybe also another excuse for doing something like this, because we enjoy each other's company, we bounce off ideas, and like we just want to thrive when we are around people. So we have to just live with what we have here. I wonder,
Yeah.
Edie, since you've touched upon your work for the LGBTQ consortium, if you would like to say a few words about it. How did it come about? Because that was an important initiative that you spearheaded in the past few years.
Well, it was during the period when the university was talking about developing certain areas and hiring a large number of faculty in those areas. So people had to put in long requests justifying why it would be so super to have more people in a specific area. The digital humanities is one of those areas. But the odd thing we found is when we were talking about, well, let's see if we can have, a group that specifically does LGBTQ stuff. We realized we pretty much had a core faculty already. So it was like, well, yeah, we can try, and we didn't need to focus on any one thing because it's so interdisciplinary. You couldn't say we need absolutely to do this. So instead of that, I wrote a proposal to the vice president for research and said, could you try to fund this group? We don't need the hires that you're talking about, but we need to get more people to know each other, to have events that bring them together, to work with the major that's on campus as well, because those students didn't have a lot of other activities going with their major that were scholarly focused in that sense. And so I got a fairly sizable grant, which has lasted 6 years, and we're now going to meet with the new dean to see if we can squeeze a little more money out of her. That's next week, trying to get a little bit more money.
I definitely think it is worth it. I mean, I have participated in some of those events. The speaker series that you have organized or co-organized has just been fabulous. Let me also remind two major conferences on campus that brought scholars together as well. I think this was a marvelous initiative that certainly deserves more more support. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying. I mean, one of the other things that I was able to do, since I was also in French when we had a film festival, I tried to get at least one or two films that might have LGBTQ plus themes. So that made it even more interdisciplinary for those majors who might not have had any idea about what was going on in Europe. So, so this notion of working with other departments, working with other programs, being interdisciplinary is something that I think really is what makes our department and other departments so vibrant on campus.
Yeah, and we should also remember that, or remind our listeners that you are teaching also for the LGBT, you were teaching for the LGBT major. Also, one to highlight because I think it's like one of the few in the country.
Yeah, there are a couple more now, but we were the second to actually get a major. We had a minor, a major. We have a graduate certificate, and and that again, that was something where we were sort of things take a long time to develop, and I started working with a former professor a while back in the early 2000s to see if we could put together a major and a minor, but somehow we didn't quite get it finished, and then Esther Rothblum, who's in women's studies, said, "Well, I'll work on the paperwork if you tell me what I need to do." And so she did it, and so we wound up with minor and then a major and now a graduate certificate. So it's again, things sometimes go slowly, but I've seen them come to fruition pretty well.
No, I think this also is something to be said about the wide range of interest in our, that our department has. Like you are a scholar of French, but you're also a scholar of LGBT. I mean, the intersections of all of these interests and how they also come to bear and tell us stories about a new Europe. Like this is the Europe that we'd like to imagine and to
Right.
conjure as well. So I think that's something important to stress.
Yeah, one of the most fun classes I taught recently, knowing that I was getting near the end of my teaching, I taught a course called Queer Europe. We looked at Europe in the 20th and 21st century and different themes, looking like at architecture, how cities relate to queer spaces, obviously queer film, queer music. And it was just fun. I mean, I had a great time teaching the course and doing all the work for it. Where sometimes you have fun teaching a course, but all the work for it is something you say, "Oh God, do I have to do this again?" But no, it was just a sheer pleasure to have that opportunity as one of the things I could do.
Absolutely. I mean, I should definitely ask you to pass that information along because we should continue that tradition. That course should be in our books as well.
Well, I can always come back and teach it. You just have to pay me.
There's that too. Yes. Let me work on that. Let
Okay.
me work on that. Uh, I also, wanna stress for those of you who are unaware the tremendous amount of work you've done for the university in terms of service to the university. For sure, this is a fact for our department. When I arrived in 2005, you were the chair, and you have been the chair. You stayed chair for a number of years, so I have observed you in that position. But you then moved on and higher up. You were already, I think, in those years, perhaps chairing the Senate.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think I was not quite. I was on the Senate Executive Committee at that point. Then I became the chair of the Senate. Then I became an administrator for 5 years. Then I came back to the department, but kept sort of doing all my academic stuff, even though I was in administration, because I like the academic and research part more than administrating.
Yes, I'm sure that like that. There's much more satisfaction in the teaching and research portion of it. But we should also acknowledge, though, that you had, what was it like? That would that be the third in command, the AVP of Faculty Affairs, like
Yeah.
under the provost? And there's the president, the provost, and then a position like.
Luckily, we didn't have to do anything to step in for the provost. Most of the time, Nancy Marlin was provost, Professor Marlin, and she was a very active provost. So I didn't have to. I just stopped by and said hello and how are things going a lot. I didn't have to worry about what was going on in her office.
But since you've mentioned Nancy, and I mean, you also worked with her, and I think perhaps you still do, in an important initiative talking about students, right? And where our passion really lies when it comes to what faculty really care about. Students, the Fulbright scholarship, you've been working on that for a number of years. Do you want to say a few things? Because these are important initiatives to allow our students to travel and actually experience the cultures and languages we teach.
Well, one of the things, I mean, I had started with for a long time. I was director of our Paris program, and we had a program in Paris for 25 or so years. But back to the world of budget cuts, it fell into that area that was not as easy to fund. But I've always been interested in international connections, and certainly our department requires students to study abroad. So it was fairly logical when Nancy Marlin, who had been my past boss, so to speak, was going to take over Fulbright advising. She asked if I would be willing to work on Fulbright advising with her and focus specifically on students who were in the humanities or who wanted to be English teaching assistants, because that was humanities and arts and English teaching assistants. And so that's sort of my area. And she did hard sciences and research. And so that I actually technically am no longer, we just finished the cycle. So I said, we'll have to see for next year how this is going to go, because it was very difficult to do during the pandemic. Um, you lose a lot of students by the wayside who just can't deal with zooming all the time and find it harder to keep things going. But Fulbright, we've had lots of students get Fulbrights, and to places that they were, I think, more adventurous. We've gotten some who've gone to Malaysia. Bulgaria has been very big recently. I've pushed a couple people to go to Bulgaria because it turns out my last name is Bulgarian, so maybe it helps if they. I never knew that, but I found it, so maybe they were lucky to say, "Oh, Bulgarian advisor." Not at all, but it was just trying to get them to think of places that weren't just France, Italy, England. I mean, that was basically in Spain. That's where everybody wanted to go.
Yes, because those are also very coveted locations, and so the competition is.
Is right. So I mean, I think we did a good job, and hopefully we'll figure out how to continue doing it despite the fact we're all still remote. The programs this year, because of COVID, were pretty much suspended all over the world. So students are still waiting to go. They're waiting to get a note. Yes, you can come there again. But right now they can't for most places.
Yeah, no, that's true too. Speaking of, as we near the end of the episode, can you tell us where your house in France is? So maybe we maybe drive along there. Should we find vicinity?
Okay. Should I really let you guys know where it is? Oh, I will. I will. It's about 6 hours directly south from Paris if you drive fast. 8 hours if you obey all the speeding laws. But it's in a little town called Castelnau de Montmirail. It's a hilltop village that was built in 1225. It's one of the most beautiful villages in France, and being there is like being in any cliched movie about having a house in the south of France. One of the things I like about it, though, is that there are actually real French people who still live there. There are, of course, a lot of expats, Brits, Canadians, Australians, Dutch. I mean, it's a little Europe and United Kingdom, but there are French people, and so it's just really a nice little place.
Is it close to the James Baldwin House in the south of France?
No, James Baldwin's place is much to the east. You could drive there in a day, but the closest African American celebrity's house we have is Josephine Baker.
Well, that's good enough for me. But in any case, it's relatively easy to access all of these places because in Europe, everything is much closer than it is anywhere else, certainly here in the States. Um, so I also would like to know, as a way of start winding down the conversation here, what is it that you are reading right now?
Okay, well, a lot of times I don't remember the names of the books I've been reading, but actually I can tell you the names of two books I've just finished. One is called Journey into Midnight. It's by a Hungarian author, Antal Zerb. It was written in the 1930s, and it's a very, very strange novel. It's about a group of friends who become friends as teenagers, and we follow them in sort of their life and their adventures. One of them is a young guy who has a death wish, so he tries to figure out ways to commit suicide. Another one is going to become a thief. Another one is just kind of, he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and he's the one who's the hero. A typical thing for him is he gets married, he's on his honeymoon, the train stops in Italy on their way to Rome. He goes out of the train for a minute, and then he gets back. And he gets on the wrong train and goes somewhere else in Italy and says, "Oh well, I guess I don't need my wife. I'll just explore Italy, and she can go on to Rome."
This is interesting because the 30s would be it was written in the 30s. That would be during fascism in Italy.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of, I mean, they refer to World War One a little bit, but it's not. It does give you the idea that they're living in a very strange and upset world, and there are references to Mussolini in it. So it's cognizant of its time. Most of it takes place in Italy. A part of it takes place in Paris. The rest takes place in Hungary, obviously. So it was fascinating. The other thing I read, see, I've read two books recently. It's called The Final Days of Abbot Montrose. By the Norwegian mystery writer Sven Elvestad, and that was written in 1900. So it's a pretty interesting, not quite Sherlock Holmes, but very much like it. And one of the things about Elvestad that was interesting, of course, he was gay and was not out at that time. So the book, in a way, Abbot Montrose is the mystery in it, and it, in a way, perhaps reflects his own hiding his identity. So those are the two things I read, and I had a great time reading them. Now I have to move on to something else.
It sounds like retirement is a very good place to be. Lots of time on your hands to do a lot of great things. Thank you so much for being with us. We love to have you go first because, of course, you are laying down the foundation for the following programs, the following podcasts. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay safe and sound. Arrivederci.
Ciao.
Imagine Europe podcast is a production of the Department of European Studies at San Diego State University. Our theme music is provided by Holly Ransom Thompson, production and sound recording by Suzanne Foray, project management and administration by Veronica Gonzalez. We would like to thank our host, Clarissa Clow, and our guest, Professor Emerita Edith Bankov, and the Department of European Studies faculty, students, and alumni who support our vision and our programming. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing.